So this should say, and my apologies, this should say from reading. Okay, so ELL students improve their writing from reading. So in other words, it's again that idea of input and examples. So more and more examples of reading are a great way for students to improve their writing. And I'll mention how to do that a little bit in this video, and then again in the next one. This is my preference for English language learning in sort of a general ELL classroom, not necessarily an SSAT class, but in any ELL setting. I like a communicative model, and the communicative model of teaching is such that students are producing language, and hopefully they're doing it in sort of a natural way. So that could mean dialogues, real life dialogues. That could mean games where they're actually using the target language, which is English, in their games. Okay, so I want students communicating. But I also like to use aspects of an audiolingual method. So audiolingual is just repeat, listen, repeat, listen, repeat, listen, repeat. And I really think that does have its place, especially when students are working out their pronunciation and their intonation and so on. You can do some drills. For children, drills can quickly get boring if you use that sort of drill and kill approach. It can get really boring. And they could also, they could do that with by listening at home on a computer. So as a classroom teacher, I prefer the communicative model, but I think audiolingual ideas do have their place, so that listen and repeat style. And then the other thing that I really think is important for adults of all ages, we do it with kindergarten students, and then we forget that adults need this too, is the idea of a total physical response, where students are either touching the target vocabulary, or they're moving around the classroom, they're getting up and moving. It's important to remember that a student who is awake is the only kind of student who can learn. If a student's asleep, they're not getting anything. So every once in a while, I think you need to get the student up and moving. There's pretty good information to suggest that sort of in the middle of a typical lesson, let's say it's an hour long or an hour and a half, towards the middle, there tends to be a real dip in attention. And especially this happens with students who might have a little bit of attention deficit disorder, or students who just are more physical kids. They tend to sort of tune out the speaking after a while, and they need to get up and do something. So I'll talk about some techniques that you can do with that. One quick idea is to throw around a Nerf ball or a softball around when you're getting responses from the students, and it just helps keep students in tune with what's going on. Okay, and the last point, and I think this is really, really important. Students acquire vocabulary best when it is heard and read often and in context. So there does need to be some repetition of vocabulary and building of pre-learned vocabulary, and it works best when it's in a certain kind of context. So giving a student a list of randomly generated words that may be on an SSAT test is probably not, while that is a technique in itself, it's probably not giving them the context that they might need to help lock that into their long-term memory. Okay, so part one is an explanation of how the test actually works. And we're going to start off with just kind of a general bit of information that comes right from ssat.org, which is the main website. Now, this website is really valuable, and I suggest that all teachers take a look at that, because it kind of explains a lot about the test, and a lot of the information that I'll be going over comes right from there. So I've explained the first part already. There are 3 measured skills that the SSAT takes, and then there's a third one that's not measured, but it's given to the schools. So why don't I start off with the last one? So students do a writing sample, and it's based on 2 possible prompts that they're given. They're never the same. So students will get 2 prompts, and they need to choose one prompt and they write based on that prompt. Now, this is not measured by SSAT, but it's really, really, really important because that information is sent directly to the school that's looking at that student as a possible candidate. And so the school could potentially just eliminate that child based on the writing sample. So if the writing sample doesn't look up to snuff, that could be a big problem. And it's very unfortunate. Now, the scored portion of the test is the basic verbal section. Now, verbal does not mean speaking. Verbal has to do with vocabulary, and there are two types: synonyms and analogies. The second type is quantitative. So these are basically mathematical problems, and they're often word-based problems. And I'm not going to talk too much about the mathematics section in this video. That will be in another video. And finally, there's a reading comprehension section. So all these three sections are scored. And this just generally gives kind of an overview of the timing. So there are three levels of the SSAT. The first level is grade 3 and 4. So these are students who are applying for usually the next year. So if they are a grade 4 student, they're applying for grade 5, they'll take this test. So this first section that the grade 3 and 4 students write is called the quantitative section. The quantitative section is the math. They have 30 minutes to complete 30 questions. The second part is the verbal, which again is the vocabulary. And they have 20 minutes in order to complete 30 questions. Now, bear in mind, the students have now been writing. These are young students. They've now been writing for almost an hour, about 50 minutes, but they've certainly been sitting down in a chair for over an hour by this point. They get a 15-minute break. So hopefully the students get a chance to get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, or whatever they need to do. And that's something that you can coach the young students to do, is that after that hour-long break, they do need to get up, stretch their legs, move around, and get a drink, go to the bathroom. Next part is the reading section, and again, 28 questions, 30 minutes. So again, it's about a minute per question. By this time, the students are quite tired, and then they need to go into 15 minutes of writing at the end. So the overall total for this one is an hour and 10 minutes.